We'll move on to some NBA fantasy now. So it is the All-Star weekend, and so we've got a huge week, at least in most formats. Some formats do chop it up into 2 weeks, but for most formats, it's that double week. So it's a bit of a time where we can look to stash a couple of players if they have been injured, or we sometimes look forward to, and it seems like this year especially, there's a lot of players coming back from injury. So we're going to run through some names who, first of all, players who we're expecting to come back from injury. Some of them have already come back, and what we are looking to expect from these players. So I'll run through the list first, and then I'll throw it over to you, Cal. We got Lauri Markkanen, Kevin Love, Cole Anthony, Christian Wood, Devonte Graham, and he played today, Bogdan Bogdanovic. All of these players are expected to come back, if not the first game, very, very soon after the All-Star break. Let's just, if you just name one of those players that stand out to you and what you're sort of thinking we can expect from them. Who's jumping out at you first there, Cal?
Well, I think the biggest name on that list from a fantasy point of view has to be Christian Wood.
Yeah.
Those Houston Rockets have been terrible without him. I think they're on an 11-game losing streak or 12-game losing streak, something atrocious. And he, when he went down, they were above 500. They were about 11-10. Yeah. He's a great player. He puts up incredible fantasy stats. So, blocks, rebounds, points, threes, reasonably efficient as well. So he is a must-have. I'd be looking forward if he gets back soon.
Do you think that his production is going to be the same compared to when he went down? Obviously, he had that little bit of period where James Harden was there, but obviously when he left, he was still putting up huge numbers. Are you worried about a shutdown at all or anything like that to end the season, obviously with the Houston Rockets doing so poorly?
The only thing I'd be worried about is if they do decide to maybe actually, no, I'll take it back because they don't have that pick this year anyway. So there's no point for them to tank. They might as well get guys out there. You might as well get some, you might as well get some plays up, right? Makes sense.
Yeah, right. I didn't realize they didn't have that pick.
I think it's a weird thing where it's like there's like swap rights. So even if they do well, the swap rights, I mean, they're just going to lose it anyway. So
is it OKC that has it on the like Chris Paul trade or something?
It might be. That sounds likely. We went to OKC.
Maybe fact check that first. I'm going to highlight a player here in Kevin Love, one player that we haven't seen play basically at all this season. Wondering what we're going to get from him. We're going to speak about another Cav player later on in Lauri Nance Jr. and him coming back from injury as well. I'm wondering how much of an impact he has. He could very well be on your waiver wire. I would definitely pick him up if he's there. I think he's worth a sort of speculative ad. He's someone who can put up stats within a, sub 30-minute a night role. We'll get your threes, we'll get your points, get your rebounds, especially now that Drummond is no longer there, who's hogging all those boards. I think he's going to, get close to his sort of 8-9 rebounds a game, give you decent threes, give you decent free throw percentage, assists maybe a little bit. So, but I am curious to your take as well. I know you're a bit lower than Kevin Love than I am historically. What you're expecting from Kevin Love once he comes back from injury?
Look, I'll start off by I hate to say I told you so, but I told everyone not to draft this man.
Yeah, you did.
But look, if he's on the waiver wire, I definitely add him in preparation for him coming back to the team. So I think he would fit well with the new additions that they have had. And when he does have minutes, he can still hit the three. He'll get the reasonable rebounds and points with those threes as well. So he'll hurt you on field goal. So I would definitely take note of that. But otherwise, you'd probably have to punt blocks as well. He doesn't get any blocks, but he's a specialist. If he's on the waiver wire, I'd pick him up.
Oh, yeah. If he's on the waiver wire, I think he's an easy ad. And if it doesn't go well and Lauri Nance supplants him, or if he gets re-injured again, no big deal. So I definitely think he's worth a swing. I would, obviously, if you've been holding him, you keep stashing him. He's about to come back. But I wouldn't be expecting I think if he is a top 100 player, I think that's a win. Like that's a really good effort from Kevin Love. I think he'll be close to that. I don't necessarily think Lauri Nance will play ahead of him, or at least not so much that Kevin Love's going to be playing less than 24 minutes a night. So I think I can still see him playing between that 24 minutes and maybe 28 to 29 minutes sort of mark between there. And I think in that kind of a minute role, he is valuable. So I sort of expect to see him as about that 100th ranked player. All right, well, a bit of technical difficulties, but back online. We're going to be talking about the injuries of players who might not be back straight away, but are not too far away from returning. So I've got a bit of a list here, a bit more sort of uncertainty in these guys. I'll start off by going with Marcus Smart, Delon Wright, a couple of shooting guards there, Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, some big names, and as we mentioned before, Lauri Nance Jr., who apparently has been ahead of schedule in shooting drills, but his initial timetable was a bit longer than this. So if he does come back after the All-Star game, would beat that timetable. Obviously, you've got a couple of big names in Kevin Durant and Anthony Davis, who players would love to have back. Obviously, you're stashing them and holding them and just crossing your fingers. What about these other guys in terms of Delon Wright, Lauri Nance Jr.? What can we expect from those guys moving forward? I'm particularly interested in what you think of Delon Wright with the situation over there in Detroit, Cal.
Well, maybe I'll let you take the reins of Dylan, right? I'll jump in and say, out of those guys, I'm most keen on Lauri Nance Jr.
Okay.
Just because this man was like almost leading the league in steals, which is very, very useful for your team. And he's an essential part to that Cleveland team. I don't think Kevin Love will affect him a whole lot. I still think he'll get his minutes. He's actually got one of the highest deflection rates as well in the league, as well as steals. So he's super active on the defensive end. And that's why you had him on your team. He wasn't really there for a whole lot else. I guess he gets you half a block as well, and he gets you the odd points, rebounds, one steal a game. But from a fantasy point of view, he, I mean, those two steals are so useful. So he's on my radar when he gets back. He's always good to have.
Yeah, I am curious to see how it goes with him and Kevin Love returning. Like we mentioned before, I think he is going to take a bit of a hit. But I do think that because he was averaging 33 and a half minutes a game without Kevin Love being there. I definitely think that's going to probably drop below 30 minutes a night. And I think that's enough for him to sort of lose a fair chunk of his value based on the fact that those steals are such a big part of what makes him valuable. He gets you sort of nearly 7 rebounds a game, which is decent. And it's a decent amount of assists from the power forward at over 3 a game. But outside of that, it's pretty dry, less than 10 points a game. Free throw percentage is poor. For a big guy, 48% isn't outstanding. So I'm probably maybe less psyched than you are. And I definitely would not be expecting what he was putting up before the injury, just because I expect Kevin Love to at least take some minutes away from him. But I do think that they'll squeeze enough that he'll still be rosterable and he'll still be someone that you want to have on your team, especially if you are in need of steals. But I just wouldn't be expecting the world once he comes back. And definitely if he's on your waiver wire, you 100% pick him up, especially by all the reports that he's ahead of schedule. So I think you'd probably do that now and just wait to see what happens over the All-Star break. We'll touch on Delon Wright. Delon Wright's been a headache for me. Like I've had him in fantasy teams in the past. I've dropped him. I've picked him back up before. I've dropped him again, and then someone else has picked him up, and he's gone off when everyone else got injured. There's so many questions in that Detroit team. I just can't shake the feeling that they just don't like him, and if they've got any excuse to play anyone else other than him, they will. And I think he may have some short-term value whilst I'm not sure exactly what the status. I'll just have a quick look up now of what Killian Hayes is doing.
I was just looking at it then. So it says he might have been back in mid-March at the earliest.
Yeah. Okay. So he might be a little bit further away. Maybe an April sort of return. So Delon might have a little bit of short-term value, but I don't really see him being a long-term rest of season sort of high impact guy. But he'll be all right for the sort of back end sort of. I see him kind of similar to like a player like Bogdanovic, as we talked about earlier. That same kind of level of value. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, you got a player like Dennis Smith Jr. as well. He's getting a bit of minutes at the point guard position. And Delon Wright he is pretty useful where he can play kind of, the 1, 2, and 3. So he probably still will get his minutes, but you might say that his assists could go down. Yeah.
You've got Sabin Lee there as well, who's emerged recently. Obviously, we talked about him as a waiver wire pickup. He's not that anymore. Obviously, we said to temper expectations. but he's still going to steal a little bit of minutes away from Delon Wright. And that's really why Delon was good for a little chunk of the season there, because there was no one else on this team, especially once they traded Derrick Rose. So I'm a little bit down on Delon Wright. I would not be expecting what he was doing before the injury when you pick him back up, but take a swing, see how it goes, but don't expect too much. All right, let's move on to the last session of this injury little list that we're going on. And it's these players that are a little whiles off, highlighted by the bane of my existence, the biggest regret of my draft, and that is Jaron Jackson Jr. What the fuck is going on with this guy? No one has any idea what's happening or where he's been up to. No update has been found. Apparently he's been participating in shoot around, but outside of that, who knows? CJ McCollum apparently hasn't been running, so he's a little whiles off. We did have him as a buy low candidate earlier. I'm less keen on that now with this report that's come out recently. Jusuf Nurkic is still a little while away with his broken hand. And then Caris Levert is still probably maybe closer than some of these guys, but might still be ramping up after some sort of serious health concerns earlier in the season. Who stands out to you in this list here, Cal?
I like Caris. I think from reports that I've read, he is kind of ramping things up now. He's not going to come back before, obviously, the All-Star break, but I think shortly after he could make a return. So he could be maybe mid this month. You might see him back on the court, which I'm excited for because he's on my fantasy team. And that Indiana team desperately need him because they're really just draining Sabonis and Brogdon pretty much to their bone. Everything's going through them. I think he's that perfect guy to slot in to really take some of the minutes away and run the second unit, just like what he was doing in Brooklyn. So I can see his value being similar to what it was in Brooklyn. Maybe some elements of it could go a little bit down because he had such a green light there with the second unit. Yeah. But I still think he will have a really nice high usage. And the injury that he had was a bit of a surgery. So you really would expect him to come 100% back. When he is healthy, he should be 100% what he was.
And he's going to beat a player like TJ Warren, who looks like he's still months away, is another report. So he's another player you can add to this list. I wouldn't be stashing TJ Warren, by the way. So he's going to come in and a player of his position who's no longer there. So I think that's going to aid his value. So I like that one. I want to touch on CJ McCollum because I think we might have differing opinions on this guy. I mean, we did highlight him as a sell high earlier in the season. And I still think that people might have a fonder memory of CJ than I think his value is going to be when he comes back. I'm worried that people are going to expect him to be that top 10, top 15 player that he was prior to the injury. And I just don't see that happening. I think he's going to lose a bit of a step, which is a big shame because he was put up a career year, and I will acknowledge that. But yeah, I don't see it being really close to what it was, and I think he's going to be closer to sort of like a 40th or 50th ranked player, if I'm honest. Just because some of that shooting, I think, is going to drop off. Some of the steals is going to come back as well. The points might drop as a result as well. So I am a little bit down on CJ. And if by name recognition only, you can sell him for a top 20 or 25 player on a team that's doing well that can wait, maybe you do so. But I think that'd be hard to do. So you just sort of got to temper expectations, I guess.
Yeah, here's a weird one because he was doing so well. And it's one of those things, I guess the league right now, the offenses is clicking. But in terms of his stats, he was having career highs in points, assists, steals, field goal, 3-point field goal, 3-point made. It's ridiculous. But I think the one thing which you could say is a positive that should be maintained is I think their coach just kind of told him, hey, look, we know you're a great 3-point shooter. He just gave him a huge green light and was like, CJ, just let him fly from 3. And last season, he was putting up 7 attempts a game. This season, before he went down, he was putting up 11 3-point attempts a game, which is huge. And that's why his value is so good because he was averaging almost 5 3-pointers a game, which is absurd. Yeah. So if he does keep shooting them, if he keeps shooting 11 3-pointers a game, he can hit 4 of them. Like he can. That's I what he does.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that will maintain it, but it's more the percentages and the steals that I think will drop, and that can have a huge impact on the ranking, as we know. But I still think, the 3-pointers, I think it will be his career high once it comes back, and it still will be of a high level. But it's more those percentage and steals that I was worried about. And if anyone has any idea what is going on with Jaron Jackson Jr., please let us know, because we have heard nothing. This man was supposed to be back a month ago. He had a surgery before Kristaps Porzingis, 3 months before Kristaps Porzingis, and nothing. The Grizzlies are just keeping their mouths shut, and I'm hating the fact that I drafted him in the mid rounds and just holding him through this whole thing. And I've managed to stay in the hunt for playoffs, but god damn, I need him to come back soon.